Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am doing the Algebra 2K 3.1 test review. I'm not going to do the whole review. I'm going to do what I usually do and just select a couple of problems to help you out. So the first one I'm going to do is number 2 on your review. So number 2 says the square root of 4x plus 1 equals x minus 1. Okay, put that out of the way. Alright, so I'm trying to get x by itself. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to get rid of this square root right here. So I'm going to square both sides, right? What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And on the left, I'm going to get 4x plus 1 equals. Now here's where it's tricky. You cannot distribute this square. You have to FOIL it. Just like that. So I have 4x plus 1 equals, here I get, first is x squared, outer you get negative x, inner you get negative x, and then last you get positive 1. And so bring everything down, 4x plus 1 equals x squared minus 2x plus 1. Next step here, what I'm going to do is, see I have an x and an x squared, two different types of variables with different degrees. So I want to get everything to one side and equal it to 0. So these guys will cancel. All that's left on the left is 0. So then I have x squared minus 6x, and then these guys cancel. Now this is from a while ago. You have to remember your factoring rules. Both of these I'm going to factor out the GCF. They have an x in common. So I'm going to factor out the x. Do my little factor bubble. How do I get back x squared? I'm going to be x times x equals x squared. And then x times what gives me negative 6x. So this will be negative 6. So equaling both to 0. So I get x equals 0. And then x equals positive 6. Alright, so I'm always going to go back and check, right? So looking back at what my original equation was, I have the square root of 4x plus 1 equals x minus 1. Here I'm going to check. So if I plug in 6, right, you get 4 times 6 plus 1. Does that equal 6 minus 1? And so 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25. Ooh, sorry. Now the square root of 25 is 5, and then 6 minus 1 is 5. So that one works. Let me check my other guy. So I have 4 times 0 plus 1. Does that equal 0 minus 1? Now 4 times 0 is 0, so you get the square root of 1. Now the square root of 1 is 1. In this case, it doesn't equal negative 1, so that one doesn't work. So my answer is x equals 6. Alright, on to the next problem. I'm going to do number 3. Number 3 says I have the square root of x plus 9 minus the square root of 2x equals 0. So my first step is to get rid of this minus sign. I'm going to move this square root over. So I get x plus 9 equals the square root of 2x. And then square both sides. So you get x plus 9 equals 2x, right? Because a square root and a square cancels. And then I'm going to put move this x over, so subtract x. So you get 9 equals 2x minus x is just x. So x equals 9. Now let me double check. So the square root of 9 plus 9 minus the square root of 2 times 9, does that equal 0? So 9 plus 9 is 18. 9 times 2 is 18, so the square root of 18 minus the square root of 18 does give me 0. And I'm done with that one. Alright, so let's go ahead and skip to number 5. So number 5, I have 2x minus 5 to the 1/2 power equals 3. Now, don't let this 1/2 power trick you. Remember, x to the 1/2 power means the same thing as the square root of x. So for example, if I had x to the 1/3 power, that would mean the same thing as the cube root of x. Or x to the 1/4 power would give me the 4th root of x. So here, there's really not imaginary, but like a 2 here. It's just understood, so we don't have to write it when we write the square root. So I can rewrite this problem right here as a square root of 2x minus 5. Even though I don't write the 2, it's understood that there is a 2. And this is 3. So I want to get x by itself, but I have to first get rid of the radical, so I'm going to square both sides. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So on the left, I'm left with 2x minus 5 equals 3 squared, which is 9. Add 5 to get 2x equals 13. Ooh, sorry, my paper moved. 14. So then divide it by 2, so your x equals 7. So I'm always going to go back and just check. The square root of 2 times 7 minus 5, plugging it back in, does that equal 3? So 7 times 2 is 14. So I have 14 minus 5. And then that's the square root of 9. Does the square root of 9 equal 3? Yes. So I am good right there. So my answer is x equals 7. Alright, so now we're going to do number 8. So number 8 says we have the square root of 2x minus 5 equals 4 times x minus 3. Now for this problem, I want to square both sides. This one's kind of tricky. So on the left side, the square and the square root cancel. But on the right side, this square and this square root cancel, but you have to also distribute the square to the 4. So 4 squared, right, means 4 times 4. So that's 16. So I'm going to get 16 times x minus 3, because the square is going to cancel out right here. So my math spidey senses are telling me I need to distribute. So you get 16x minus 16 times 3 is 48. And so now I'm just going to move everything. Let's see, move all my x's to one side. So subtract 2x. So I get negative 5, bring down the negative 5. 16 minus 2 is 14. Bring down my negative 48. And then now I'm going to add 48 to both sides. So bring down my 14x. 48 minus 5. 43. And then divide by 14. So my answer is, I can't reduce this, so my answer is going just to be 43 over 14. Now I can go back and check, right? So 2 times 43 over 14 minus 5 equals 4 times 43 over 14 minus 3. Let's see, 2 goes into 14 7 times. So I get 43 over 7 minus 5. That's all underneath the square root. And then I have 43 over 14 minus 3 here. Over here I'm going to find a common denominator. Move this up. So 1 times 7 is 7. 7 times 5 is 35. So 43 minus 35, I get the square root of 8/7. And then here I have 4. 43 over 14 minus common denominator 14. So 14 times 3 is 42. So you get the square root of 1/14. And from here I'm just going to double check. Right, so if I plug in the square root of 8/7 in my calculator, right, because it's all underneath the square root, so I just plugged it in just like that, I get 1.07, so this is 1.07. On the right side, if I take the square root of 1/14, right, you get 0.27, but then I multiply that by 4, I also get 1.07. So just double check, always make sure you do your problem right, and it works. So your final answer was 43 over 14. I know it looks scary, but like I said, still correct, still your answer. Alright, so the last one I'm going to do from this section is number 10. So number 10, this looks kind of scary. You have 6 minus 2/3 square root of 4x minus 1 equals -4. So I want to get x by itself, but x is underneath a radical. So I need to get the radical, right, the square root, by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 6 from both sides. So you get -2/3 square root of 4x minus 1 equals -10. Now I want to get rid of the 2/3 and it's negative, so I'm going to multiply. You can divide by 2/3, but I don't like dividing fractions, so I'm going to multiply by -3/2. So what I do to the one side, you have to do to the other, right? So watch, these negatives, when you multiply negative by negative, they become positive. These 2's cancel, and then these 3's cancel. So all you're left with on the left side is the square root of 4x minus 1. And then negative times a negative is a positive. I'm going to put this over 1. Remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So 10 times 3 is 30. And then you have 30 divided by 2, which half of 30 is 15. Alright, so now I'm going to, now I have my radical by myself, so we're in good shape. I'm going to square both sides. So I get 4x minus 1. And then 15 squared in my calculator is 225. Add 1. So 4x equals 226. And then I'm going to divide by 4 to get x by itself. So 226 divided by 4 gives me, let me see, half of 226 is 113, and half of 4 is 2, or you could give it to me in a decimal, so you could get 56.5. So either answer is correct.